Before the turnpike, before settlers came and built the towns, there was the Hempstead Plains, the third largest prairie in the United States, and the only true prairie in New York State.
The Hempstead Plains once covered 60,000 acres in the middle of Nassau County, from the Queens border all the way over to the Suffolk County border. And as the historians write in some of their documents, the grasses were so high that a man could barely see over them, and the wave action from the wind made it look like the ocean. This is a pretty area right here because it's pretty typical of the different native grasses and the remnants of the wildflowers that bloomed this summer. If you look in this little stand of shrubs right there, there's a couple of nests. The native grasses are characteristically bunch grasses, and you can see from this little stand that they actually do grow in bunches. Here's sandplain gerardia blooming. It's almost finished, but it still has a couple of flowers left on it, and I see one bud, so it should get about one more. Each of those little flowers only lasts one day. It'll get pollinated, and we've seen bees in here pollinating the plants. And then at the end of the day, it falls off. So this is a globally endangered species.
Until fairly recently, the plains dominated the Long Island landscape. Historian Paul Van Wee describes the scene in days gone by.
100 years ago, if you could see Hempstead Turnpike, you would see a very, very beautiful country road lined with large country homes and farmhouses and lots of farmland. One of the things that would be very different is when you would look off Hempstead Turnpike in those days, you could see for miles unobstructed. This was the Hempstead Plains. It was very flat. It was mostly treeless. It was generally farmland. And from down here, you could see all the way up to Garden City across the plains in those days.
You know, that's the only thing you saw around the place fly. That was the greatest, besides the farms and whatnot. They landed, anytime you lose an engine, you land in a potato field. Or land in any farm field, you'll be all right.
We begin at the corner of Hempstead Turnpike and Franklin Avenue, the corner that gave birth to the village, and that was the site of the landmark Calb Hotel.
They'd go to market every day, you know. They'd leave here about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and with a wagon loaded high up. As I recall, they went in every day, but it seemed strange that they would be able to go every day. People used to drive in these, you know, wagons, and by the time you got out this far, they were looking for a place to rest overnight. They didn't want to go much further.
See, this was a turnpike. This is New Hyde Park Road. This was back here. This, my father's butcher shop was over in the back of the hotel there. And on this side, they had sheds where they could put the horses in. They would come in and make arrangements to stay overnight. They had bedrooms upstairs. The dining room was down. It's quite a dining room, and then all upstairs from there. Yeah, the railing, the foot railing there where you put your foot when you're having a beer. And then beyond, in the corner, is a pool table. And they would have, and then in the back was a bowling alley in the back of the bar there.
And that was there in 1920 when I was there, and 1923 it burned down. And I wasn't allowed to, I was in the bedroom looking out the window at the thing being burned down. Because I was only, 8 years old.
Monsignor Lutz over at the rectory rang the church bell violently as a danger signal. People came out with buckets to try to put the fire out. It was impossible. Luckily, the wind direction changed at the last minute, and the flames blew over the turnpike. Rather than taking the whole village behind it along, all of Franklin Square would have been destroyed.
But it was so old, though, the timber was so dry, they couldn't save any part of it at all.
Paul Van Wee, Historical Society president, and Bill Widener recount the story of the turnpike.
It really began as a dirt country road in colonial times, and in the early 1800s the road was improved into a turnpike, and there were tolls charged, and you had to pay so many cents per mile as you went from Hempstead to Jamaica. Now, it continued to be a toll road until 1897, when the road was paved and it became a state road. There was a trolley line that went all the way from Jamaica to Hempstead. Today we have buses, and the trip cost 5 or 10 cents, something like that. And via the trolley, you could get all the way to Brooklyn.
One track trolley, and they had to stop off at different stops, like stop 20 and stop 33, and they waited for one trolley to bypass the other.
Now, when the trolley was constructed in 1902, suddenly Franklin Square was open to suburban development, and the first subdivisions were made, and people came out here to live because there was a way to get to New York City and work. Previous to that, most of the houses in Franklin Square were farmhouses, and where we are just now was the site of the Hoffman farmhouse, which was one of the largest houses in town. The Hoffmans had a very large family and a very large farm, and they were very prosperous. They were instrumental in the development of our business community, of the church in Franklin Square, and the fire department, among other things. One of the most prominent of families.
Doris Jones recalls growing up on the Hoffman farm.
My grandparents were Jacob and Catherine Hoffman, and they had the farm, which ran from along Hempstead Turnpike and down to the back, where we're living right now is part of Grandpa's farm. We lived with my grandmother until I was 7 years old in the main house on Hempstead Turnpike. And I can remember sitting on the porch with my grandmother when they ripped up the old Hempstead Turnpike to pave it the way it is today. This is Willie Hoffman. He had the lumber yard. That's George Hoffman, who had the Hoffman Chevrolet. And then Gus Hoffman, he had a gas station, a service station on the corner of Hempstead Turnpike and Franklin Avenue. And this is John Hoffman. He had the bowling alleys. And Joseph Hoffman had the soda, Hoffman Beverages. They all were, and then this was Andrew Hoffman. He had Jamaica lumber with my father.
My goodness. We're standing in front of C.J. Wellington's now, which is currently a pub-type restaurant. There have been many, many businesses located in C.J. Wellington's over the years. Mr. Tamala chose this building for his store because in the early 1900s, New Hyde Park Road was very much the main street of Franklin Square. It was a very wide road, and people thought that this would be the street in town in those days. It's interesting to note that most of the German farmers who came to Franklin Square in the 19th century were Catholic. Father Conrad Lutz came from Brooklyn to be the pastor of Franklin Square, and he envisioned a gigantic new church, and it's the one you see today. The cornerstone was laid 75 years ago. The diamond anniversary of St. Catherine's Church was just recently celebrated. Franklin Square has a very interesting ethnic history. The Germans were here earlier, and then the Italian ethnic group showed up. And as you can see from the shops and from the many influences in town, their influences have lasted a long time and helped to mold the community.
Her husband had the blacksmith shop in Franklin Square that we have. This goes way back in here.
For the present, the photos and artifacts of Franklin Square's past are stored away in preparation for the opening of a brand new historical museum. Elizabeth McIsaac and museum director Herb Kalb explore the treasure trove.
School, Monroe Street School.
It's a nice looking spot.
We can't find anybody who knows how to fix it.
The plot arch.
Oh, the plot arch, sure. Well, it's still there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's still there. Yeah,
I think we have pictures where it was being built.
yeah.
Those you'll have to go. George, let me.
That's him at the water district. That was on New High Park and right off of Hempstead Turnpike.
Was part of a wheel that put this together, and those were the spokes in that wheel.
This is the demolition of Monroe Street School. Right now, there's all houses there where that is. That's her.
Point them out again, sure.
That's her.
All right.
Here was dry goods. Their store was on New High Park Road.
He used to go around and with shoelaces and wearing apparel.
This is the Franklin Square National Bank, which is now European American Bank.
Yeah.
That's the way it started.
That's the way it started.
Right.
And
One of the founders of the Franklin Square National Bank was Fred Schilling, who owned the hardware store across the street. Fred Schilling had a cousin by the name of Arthur Roth, a banker who lived in the Bronx. And he really took the bank in his own hands. He operated the bank on a day-to-day basis as cashier, and his main business quickly became the FHA mortgage. Franklin Square National serviced more FHA mortgages than just about any other bank on Long Island during the early 30s. Another addition was made in 1946, the building you see today, and Mr. Roth started opening up branches all over Long Island.
Actually, I started opening Christmas clubs. That was my job. And there were two of us that worked all day long opening Christmas clubs. That's how many, and lines formed. It was a great place to work. Everybody, it was family when I was there. Very nice.
By 1968, Franklin had become the 18th largest bank in the United States, and banking history had been made. The Franklin National Bank was the first bank to have a parking lot anywhere in the United States. They were the first bank to have a walk-up window, and they were the first bank to have a bank credit card.
Like almost all of Long Island, the story of Franklin Square is in part one of rural twilight and of rapidly disappearing open spaces. These movies, taken in the early 1930s in nearby West Hempstead, depict the traditional activities of church and family and are set amid the construction of scores of new homes.
Well, we had, you know, we had streams running across the roads on the turnpike.
Certain section of Franklin Square was lower, and we had floods there.
People built bungalows down there. That street is McKinley Avenue, you know. And you know McKinley, this one block over. And what would happen when it would rain, it wasn't quite a big creek down there all the way up here, but you'd get the water down there that would collect. And this is where Foster's Brook used to cross the turnpike. It used to cross the turnpike right here where this driveway is. There was a little bridge, and every spring Foster's Brook would flood. One interesting thing about Foster's Brook is that in the 1930s and 40s there was a great deal of development in Franklin Square, and we had built so many homes, suddenly we realized there was no place for a park. The only place left that was open in town was a marshy area on either side of the brook. Now, John Rath, who was one of our local leaders, really was in favor of putting a park there, and he persuaded the town and the county not to sell those lots and to put them aside. And the fruit of his labor is our beautiful Rath Park, which opened in 1959 and 1960. Now, they took the brook and they put it underground. They filled in the whole area, and today there's the pool and the tennis courts and the ball fields, and we managed to get some recreational area in a very densely populated neighborhood. Foggy morning in 1957. This is the day they started to clear the land to build Rath Park. And look at those huge trees. I mean, this is what the site of Rath Park looked like, and that's John Rath standing there in his overcoat, kind of watching the progress go on, you know. So it gives you a good idea, you know, in 1957 there was still this land around that, you know, with it was like a little forest in the middle of town. As you can see as we walk along here, so many of the sites we're visiting are geographically near one another. That's because Franklin Square is a very small community. It's only maybe 2 miles by 1.5 miles, that kind of thing. And we live very near one another, and we're a very close-knit community for that reason, you know.
At the World's Fair of 1964, the Franklin National Bank produced for the United States Pavilion the film Voyage to America, a celebration of our nation of immigrants. Arthur Roth may have thought back to the early English and Dutch settlers, and later the German and Italian families with names like Schroer, Hermann, Hoffmann, Ray, and Genzeo, who populated the village at the turn of the last century and beyond.
In honor of our pastor and in memory of the deceased members of the Franklin Square Historical Society, and we give it as a token of our esteem for our great leadership of our pastor, our love for our patron saint, St. Catherine of Siena, and our loyalty to our parish. So it's from all of us, and there's also a rather substantial check that now... We have a few Ten Commandments left.
The new Franklin Square Historical Society Museum will be located fittingly in Rath Park near the Veterans Memorial, where the gazebo once stood, and where children played in the woods and open spaces around Foster's Brook.